Joining us to discuss energy maximalism in the Lone Star State, please welcome Chief Executive Officer and Chairman at T1 Energy, Daniel Barcelo, in conversation with reporter at Axios, Ben Geman.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. So let's get right into it. I think I'm really excited to have this conversation because I am really excited to do what I think is going to be a little bit of myth busting, right? And so I think we've probably all heard some version of this narrative that this is a bad time to be in clean energy manufacturing and that this is a very tough time to be in solar. It seems like perhaps, though, your experience in Texas rebuts both of those claims.
Yes, and good afternoon, everyone. You know, I've did oil and gas my entire life, from like my entire professional career. So I guess I'm used to getting yelled at, or used to being told that I'm, you know, the reasons of evil and the reasons of this and that. But you know, when I pivoted into, as you say, renewable energy, I keep thinking to myself, this is not renewable. It's just energy. So I really think that we've done a disservice to solar, maybe even onshore wind, and other energy sources as polarizing or politicizing it. I do think the shaming of, hey, we have to be sustainable, we have to do zero carbon, we have to do net zero, all of that is great and it's awesome, but I think it misses the point that solar, in particular solar and storage, can be extraordinarily low cost, extraordinarily scalable, and complement the grid, you know, in many different ways. So I think that's a key thing. For us, when we moved to Texas, we acquired assets that were in the United States. We finished construction of those assets. We commissioned those assets. And we now have a 5-gigawatt solar module plant in South Dallas that employs over 1,200 people, has a payroll of over $100 million. That was a building. It was a warehouse before. So we're creating these jobs. We're creating advanced manufacturing. Texas was very open to that. Texas has been a great, you know, in terms of how they attract energy companies. And for us, as phase 2 of it, we're building a 5-gigawatt solar cell plant, and that'll be north of Austin. But all of this ties back to, you know, Texas has been like the bastion of energy for so long. In my entire oil and gas career, from Houston to Dallas to everything to West Texas, always involved that arc. So it was very natural for me to come back to that with solar.
What is it about this sort of Texas, is it the culture, is it the regulatory circumstances? What is it that made you, when you wanted to move into that second factory, was there ever any doubt that it would be in Texas? And if not, why not?
You know, I'm a native New Yorker, love New York, but Texas just had this draw always of energy and building and risk-taking and bigger. And tacos. So for me, that was an attraction. It was during COVID that there was a lot of movement towards Texas, and then between, you know, the Joe Rogans moving there or the Elon Musks moving there, it was like this flood of people going in. Yeah. And in my mind, it was like when Tesla's moving and SpaceX is moving to Austin, there's just going to be so many derivative effects in Texas. I saw that as an interesting opportunity, and it turned out that way. You know, Austin's a build culture. It's historically an old semiconductor culture. It is the seat of government in Texas, but has a good university network. It has a good, you know, Dell network, and all of that now in the space for new manufacturing, new building was a great place to draw from either capital markets from New York or from tech markets in San Francisco. So I think that was key parts. And now when you're in Austin, you basically say someone, where are you from? Because most people aren't, and you find those unicorns that are born there. Or you're like, what are you working on? Yeah. And that randomness of what are you working on? A time clock forever, this thing here. It's just, it has that buzz right now for this moment in time.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we hear so much about the potential for new projects to put steel into the ground. I think on your second facility, aren't you about to literally put steel into the ground? And can you tell us about that?
Sure. So our second facility, which again we have the solar modules, and as a key input into that is the solar cells. We're building that in Rockdale, Texas, in Milam County, about an hour north of Austin. And foundations up, or down rather, and we'll be looking to do steel this quarter. We've publicly announced that we're looking to finish financial close also this quarter. We raised certain amounts of capital last 2 weeks ago in order to continue that build, and things are still tracking to be start of production by the end of the year. So that is a new construction. It's a greenfield. The site is an old Alcoa facility that used to employ thousands of people and had a lot of extra power. A lot of that power was found by, as to a lot of things in Texas multiple years ago, Bitcoin miners. That power now we'll be using for manufacturing, and we'll be supplying those solar cells up to Dallas for a solar module. As input to the solar cells, we're buying our solar wafers and our polysilicon from Hemlock Semiconductor and Corning. So we are kind of creating that final chain of like Michigan-based polysilicon and wafers to Texas-based cells and modules. I think it's an important part to build that entire supply chain in the United States for a polysilicon-based solar, which is the most efficient form of solar.
And so you're building a completely, it sounds like, domestic supply chain for this?
The core components will be domestic supply chain. There's other aspects of glass or glues that there's just so many Southeast Asian supply chains, but we're working as fast as we can to make them domestic. But also we want to make sure that the developers and the users of our product are cost competitive. So we're very, very tough with US suppliers as well. One of our US suppliers is Nextpower. They do steel frames, and they'll be making those frames in the United States and in Texas. So sourcing those frames versus Asian frames makes a lot of sense from logistics, but has to make sense on a cost basis too. We're looking at solar glass, looking at other encapsulants and glues, but like simple examples are like just certain adhesives and glues. They could be made in the United States. They just haven't been because we lost a lot of that manufacturing base to other parts of the world. On this point, I think it begs the question, can the US compete? I think the answer is there, a resounding yes. And one of the reasons in solar it can compete is fundamentally solar is about a conversion of silica and polysilicon through a silicon chain of machines into glass, silica, again. So you're fundamentally doing a conversion process of silicon. And that conversion process primarily as an input, apart from the machines, but more in an operating cash perspective, is about energy, specialty gases, fresh water, wastewater. So when you look at those things, the US can be very competitive, and in particular, Texas can be extremely competitive, particularly with specialty gases, natural gas or water or power. So that's a big advantage. I think the things that America needs to do better at is the non-OpEx part, but the capital part. The capital part, we're still slow compared to the rest of the world. Maybe not to Europe, probably faster in Europe, but the rest of the world, we're
low bar, but
we're still slow. And some of that gets rooted in code. I'm not saying we do anything that would ever harm anyone or the environment or create risks for that, but there's just so many ways to do and build that can be safe and that can be faster. It's all about speed to market, speed to power, and we have to do that.
Texas strikes me, and well, is clearly not only a good place to and an attractive place to build, but it of course is a place to deploy solar and basically almost any other energy technology as well. What do you see as the sort of biggest growth areas for solar deployment in Texas? Whether it's grid connected or perhaps co-located with different types of facilities.
Yeah, there's this expression which I don't want to say it's cliched, but there's an hour of sunshine in Texas can power the world for a day. That's a tremendous amount of potential energy. Now, of course, we need to capture that energy. We need to store it through time, temporally with batteries. And that's an important factor because it is there. We actually named T1 Energy, which stands for Type 1 Civilization, which gets most of its energy from its nearest star and stores it for later use. So it's a hat tip to that whole concept.
Oh, that's interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah. It's not Terminal 1. But from the use of energy there, if you look at world maps for solar irradiation and you look at those things, you'll see that there's certain places on Earth that have better weather patterns, both further away from maybe like Houston, a little bit more towards the water, more cloud cover, but you have West Texas all the way through Arizona, Nevada, California, phenomenal irradiation, very, very, very high potential. Texas is unique, and while we only do solar and we do not do wind, onshore wind has this other corridor straight down the center of the United States. When you look at West Texas in particular, that is a overlap that doesn't really exist in most places on Earth. Most places on Earth that could be industrialized.
Yep.
So when you look at West Texas, what's happened, you have both forms of that energy, which provide almost zero marginal cost. You know, wind tends to be more in the evenings or nights, and solar more in the days. And you can go through West Texas and get extraordinarily low prices. We're already seeing that with the Permian in West Texas, where there's 7 to 8 gigawatts of power that's used in order to electrify pumps, in order to get more gas and oil out of the ground. And now you're seeing more and more of those pumps are rather than diesel, and just save the diesel and use the electricity there. You've seen it in West Texas with Bitcoin mining from a few years ago. There were locations where you have CREZ lines, which were done in the mid-2000s in Texas. Those CREZ lines were built to haul a lot of that power to Dallas, Austin, Houston. When you have intersections of those CREZ lines, you have tremendous amounts of power that's going to be 90% plus solar wind, extraordinarily low cost. So when you couple that ecosystem, and granted that most of the industry is not in West Texas, you really create a potential for what should be there: steel, aluminum, fertilizer. In theory, you could have desalination, run desalination plants. Even if you don't run them 24/7, just running them a day, you have a zero marginal cost of desal, coupled with hydrogen production or fertilizer production. You can start getting crazy thoughts about terraforming even. When you really get to that zero cost. Now, again, I'm separating the marginal cost of solar versus the capital requirements. Those are still complicated. It's still hard to finance. They'll still require contracts. That still requires work with developers. Developers then have to go to the big hyperscalers or the big utilities. Those utilities and hyperscalers want the lowest PPA prices, and then the banks all want terms, and they want long-term commitments. So the CapEx part is still a bottleneck in terms of getting that capital deployed for it. But on a cash operating cost, once these assets are in, they become extraordinarily low cost. And I think that creates some of the natural tensions, particularly in Texas. The grid in Texas was built not because Texas wanted to be the big green state. They are not the big green state in terms of their historical legacy of being the oil and gas state, yet they've achieved it. They beat California on solar, they beat California on wind, and now they have this tremendous resource for hyperscalers or data centers. And it's all because they allowed risk-taking, they allowed less bureaucracy, they allowed faster build, and they did have a natural resources of good solar, good wind, just like they have good oil and good gas.
I'm really glad you mentioned the Permian and oil and gas as well, because certainly, when you're looking at the sort of domestic power sector, there's a level of competition between solar and gas. But as we're sort of the macro picture right now being the war in Iran, and this is of course putting such a spotlight on the U.S. international posture in terms of our oil exports and our natural gas exports. What do you see as the relationship between our ability to continue to use those exports and even grow those exports to provide energy for the rest of the world, to provide us geopolitical leverage? Is there a nexus there between solar power and our ability to continue or even expand those exports?
Well, I think they're very collaborative, and just like the example in the Permian, where solar can support an electrification of pumps in order to produce more, the more solar that's available in Texas or on the U.S. grid, for that matter, that means more molecules can be exported in the form of oil or natural gas. I think that's important. I think it's important to export that. It can, in some ways, export the best America has, or the American exceptionalism around the world. Europe needs our LNG. Asia needs the LNG. China needs the LNG. So an ability to export that is extraordinarily valuable. It probably has a higher price also than what we found here. We're not exporting solar yet. I think everyone forgets, like, America was not the #1 producer of gas. It was Russia. Now it's America. America was not the #1 in oil. It was Saudi. Now it's America. China has like 1.2, 1.3 gigawatts of installed capacity. I'm sorry, terawatts of installed capacity. America has 50 to 60. It's nothing. America has the land, it has the manufacturing capacity. It could so easily, reach those levels and be a strong player too. So I think it's very important that all of the above energy sources work. And when you can start manufacturing energy rather than drilling for it, you're really allowing for distributed energy to work across the United States in the form of solar.
Definitely. Those numbers are staggering, and they're also very exciting because it suggests that there's just a massive runway there. As our time runs short, you are a relatively recent transplant to Austin and to Texas, right? So for people in the audience who are either also living there or perhaps are going to be visiting there, what is the best place that they should go for barbecue after they have landed or arrived by car?
Well, I invite you. My CFO makes a mean barbecue, so I'd firstly invite everyone to my house for my barbecue when my CFO is there, not me. But other than that, it's much easier to go to La Barbecue on the east side of Austin. Phenomenal barbecue. And then maybe it's tainted now because it got a Michelin star. So we all know how that ends when we start getting Michelin stars. But right now, it's the best barbecue in Austin.
Thank you for the recommendation, and thank you for the great conversation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.